Welcome to Real Wake Up with Dean Kevin and Dean Val. Today we're doing the 2011 movie Captain America. It's the movie 2011. Well, let me give you the synopsis too, but give you an idea of what the movie is about. Again, this is 2011. Well, the scientist was leading them to a excavation site the size of a football field. At the center of the site appears to be a giant wing and fuselage. The black suited men cut through the fuselage of the mystery craft and enter. Inside, they find the remains of a massive frozen ship. One of the men brushes away at the snow and sees a shimmering red, white, and blue shield encased in ice. Shift to Norway, 1942. Two caretakers for an ancient Viking ruin listen as their town is overrun by Nazis. Suddenly, the front door blasts open and flood multiple Nazi agents. One of the caretakers is killed in the blast, and the other frantically begs that the soldiers leave him in peace. They pay no attention to the old man and instead open the building's crypts one by one. They come to one sarcophagus whose lid is too heavy to lift. A dark figure appears in the exploded entryway. Johann Schmidt, played by Hugo Weaving, who was Mr. Smith in Matrix, a high-ranking Nazi and leader of the Hydra sect, nonchalantly enters. He crosses the room, comes to the difficult-to-open sarcophagus and easily pushes the lid free. Within, he finds the skeletal remains of an old Viking clutching a glass cube, the Tesseract. The caretaker pleads for Schmidt to leave it. Schmidt scoffs and tells him how this cube would be the jewel of Odin's treasury if it weren't a fake. He smashes it on the floor and goes to the caretaker, asking where the real cube's hidden. The caretaker initially refuses, but under threat of harm to his family, he relents, gesturing to a hidden drawer across the room, part of an ancient carving the size of the wall. Schmidt pries the drawer open and finds the real glowing cube concealed within. Schmidt orders his men to shell the city and then shoot the luckless caretaker. At the recruiting station in Brooklyn, Steve Rogers, played by Chris Evans, a 20-something, can you, who was this guy, the skinny Steve Rogers? Who was that? How did they do that? Was that another actor, or how does that go? I never got that part.
It was the same actor. I think they just CGI special effects to make him look very skinny.
Okay, well, they did a good job. I was looking in the credits for the actor, but I guess they did the special effects. Okay, so here back in Brooklyn, at the recruiting station, Steve Rogers, played by Chris Evans, a 20-something, 90-pound, 5-foot tall asthmatic, eagerly waits the opportunity to enlist in the United States Army. The Army doctor gives a once-over to Steve's medical file, which reads like that of a 90-year-old man, and rejects Steve's application as the military 4F, as this is the fourth failed attempt to enlist. Distraught, Steve heads to the movies. He envies the enlisted men featured in the pre-show newsreel. and watches as other audience members tear up. A loud-mouthed, impatient moviegoer begins yelling at the screen, "Start the movie! I didn't pay to see this crap." Steve tells the man to shut up, and is surprised as the man turns around, stands up, and towers above him. In the alley behind the theater, the bully savagely beats the scrawny Steve, who bravely fights back, but is easily overpowered. When his opponent asks him why he won't simply give up, the bloodied Steve says, "I can do this all day." James Bucky Barnes, played by Sebastian Stan, Steve's best friend, comes running to the alley. He swiftly kicks the bully away and tends to Steve, who is annoyed that Bucky showed up and got rid of the bully just as Steve got his second win. Bucky is now an enlisted man. His application was accepted and he's been assigned to the 107th Infantry. In a celebratory mood, Bucky invites Steve to go dancing with a pair of girls on a double date. Bashfully, Steve tags along. The four head to the World's Fair in Queens. While Bucky canoodles with his dates, Steve watches as Playboy inventor Howard Stagg unsuccessfully demonstrates a flying car. Steve breaks away from the group and goes to another recruiting station. Bucky catches up with him and asks how Steve intends to forge his application this time. Unbeknownst to them both, Dr. Abraham Erskine, while passing by, eavesdrops on their conversation. He is fascinated by the gumption of Steve. Bucky wishes Steve good luck on his latest application, and Steve heads into the recruiting station for his 5th physical. Inside is soon followed by Dr. Erskine. Dr. Erskine has all of Steve's prior applications on file. Concerned by Steve's failed applications, Erskine tests his character by asking if his insistence on applying for military service is driven purely by desire to kill Nazis. The young man sincerely reveals that it is not. He's not a killer at heart, but does not like bullies regardless of their origin. And he also shows little concern when Erskine reveals that he is German by birth. Won over by Steve's strong will and unwavering conviction, Erskine accepts his latest application. In a secret military installation high in the Alps, Johann Schmidt brings the glowing cube to Dr. Arnim Zola, his Hydra weapon specialist. The cube's seemingly limitless power enables Schmidt and Dr. Zola to power unstoppable energy, guns, and cannons. Meanwhile, Steve has been enlisted into basic training under the careful watch of Dr. Erskine and Colonel Chester Phillips, played by Tommy Lee Jones. He and his platoon are told that they are candidates for the government's latest super soldier program. Phillips is unimpressed with Steve and is vexed by Dr. Erskine's interest in him. During basic training, Steve meets a beautiful but driven British officer, Peggy Carter, who seems to pity him. Despite being the smallest and weakest of the platoon, Steve demonstrates the greatest spirit, selflessness, and ingenuity, especially when his platoon are charged with retrieving a flag from the top of the tall pole. As the other more fit men in the company fail the task one by one as they try to climb the pole, Steve casually pulls the pin, holding it up, taking the flag when the pole crashes to the ground. Phillips, still unconvinced, tosses a grenade into the group, during calisthenics and they all scatter, Phillips is surprised when Steve, alone, leaps on top of it, willing to sacrifice himself to save the others. Before discovering that the grenade was a dummy, Phillips concedes to Erskine's decision. That evening, Dr. Erskine speaks with Steve. The two bond over a bottle of schnapps, and Dr. Erskine reveals that this is not the first time performing this experiment. He tells a story of how prior to his immigration to the US, he was ordered by Johann Schmidt to create a serum that would give a man godlike strength. Dr. Erskine created an early version of the serum he intends to use on Steve. Only when Schmidt injected himself, his body skin corroded away, leaving him as a sinewy red skeleton. Undeterred by the risk, Steve agrees to follow through with the procedure. The following morning, Steve and Peggy wind their way through Brooklyn and come to a stop in front of an old antique shop. Along the way, Steve points out various parts in the Brooklyn where he's been beaten up. She asks him why he never ran away. He responds that running away in his mind was an invitation for further abuse. The two enter the antique shop, exchange pass codes with an old woman manning the register, and descend into a secret military bunker concealed within. Peggy leads Steve to the heart of the bunker where they find Dr. Erskine preparing a medical capsule along with Howard Stark and Colonel Phillips, rubbing elbows with senators and dignitaries. Steve is told to remove his shirt and sit in the capsule. Stark describes that the procedure will first mean injecting muscle regenerators into Roger's major muscle groups, which will then be bombarded with Vita rays. Erskine has made no secret of the pain Steve will endure, but promises he'll come out stronger. Carter bids Steve good luck and joins Phillips in the overhead viewing chamber. Erskine's serum is injected into Steve's muscles, and Steve is enclosed within the Vita Ray capsule. The capsule glows brightly. Steve yells in pain, but also tells them to continue, and the procedure is quickly completed. When the capsule is shut down, Steve comes out a foot taller and 100 pounds heavier with solid muscle, which is just the most superficial aspects of his body, artificially raised to the maximum human potential. Everybody, including Phillips, celebrates the success of the procedure and descends from the viewing chamber to congratulate Erskine. A lone dignitary, in actuality a German spy, named Heinz Kruger, stays behind, placing a small satchel on a chair. Moments later, the viewing gallery explodes. Kruger descends the stairs and fatally shoots Dr. Erskine twice. He swiftly kills the guards and flees onto the streets with Peggy in the hot pursuit. Steve tends to a dying Dr. Erskine, who has just enough energy to point to Steve's heart before he dies. Steve bolts out of the bunker in pursuit of Kruger. In the street, Peggy pursues Kruger and easily kills the getaway driver. Kruger steals a taxi and aims to run over Peggy. Steve arrives in the nick of time, saving her from being killed by the coming taxi. Steve pursues the taxi on foot, running faster than a normal human can and not suffering the fatigue even a healthy man would. Displaying superhuman agility, he leaps onto the roof of the taxi, dodges Kruger's gunfire, and the two come to a crashing stop at the Brooklyn docks. Kruger shoots at Steve, who holds the car imprinted door of the wrecked cab in front of him as a shield. Kruger flees to his Hydra sub, which dives underwater just as Steve arrives. Steve dives after the sub, punches a hole through the cockpit's glass, and yanks Kruger to the surface. Kruger tells Steve that he is the first of many, that Rogers can cut off one's head, but two more take its place. He then kills himself with a cyanide capsule hidden in a fake tooth, letting out one last Hail Hydra before dying. Hail Hydra. Heil Hitler, Heil Hydra. Meanwhile, Schmidt and Dr. Zola are visited by a trio of Hitler's top commanders, tasked with inspecting Schmidt's operation. They include Schmidt saying that the Nazi Party no longer takes him and Hydra seriously due to his obsession with magic and the occult, and playfully refer to him as the Red Skull, a name that infuriates Schmidt. Schmidt takes the three to his weapons lab, where they are shown his unstoppable energy weapons and a strategic map of Europe dotted with large targets. One of the three notices a target hovering over Berlin and confronts Schmidt. Schmidt quickly vaporizes the three Nazi officers. Schmidt announces that Hydra has disbanded from the Nazi Party and is now enemies with the world. The following day, Phillips and Carter pick up the remains of Dr. Eshkin's lab. Both are despondent because the only person capable of producing the serum was Erskine himself. Steve is eager to go to the front lines of the European theater, but Phillips would rather be a lab rat than a soldier in his army. Steve is approached by a senator holding a newspaper of the prior day's events, emblazoned with a front page photo of Steve chasing down Heinz Kruger. Steve has become an overnight celebrity, and the senator has an idea that will be mutually beneficial. Steve is enlisted in the USO, United Service Organizations, and travels around the Midwest promoting war bonds and performing musical numbers in a shoddy red, white, and blue costume while carrying a triangle-shaped shield bearing the stars and stripes. He takes on the name Captain America, and the show includes a theme song written specifically for him, features dancing girls in a short segment where he punches out Hitler, played by an actor. Captain America becomes an overnight success, spawning comic books and black and white movies. His antics drum up revenue for the USO. Steve is soon taken overseas to Italy, where he is to continue entertaining the troops. Upon his arrival, the surly and war-torn man tease him and tell him to get lost. He is soon met by Carter, who, along with Phillips, is overseeing the European theater of the war. She tells him that the men are unhappy because many men from their division, the 107th Infantry, have been killed in battle. Steve realizes that this is Bucky's division and quickly runs to see Phillips. Phillips is unable to find Bucky's name on the casualty list and tells Steve to go back to his job as a movie star and a cheerleader. Steve asks Carter where the men and Bucky are being held. She shows him a map and a known Hydra weapons factory, 30-40 miles behind enemy lines. Steve hastily pulls out a pair of army trousers and leather jacket over the Captain America costume and a blue helmet with a white A stamped on the front. He aims to steal a Jeep and drive into Hydra's backyard, but she has a better idea. Howard Stark flies both of them over the battlefield in his private plane. Steve surmises that Stark and Carter have a relationship and basically withholds his feelings for her. Just as the anti-aircraft guns from Hydra begin firing at Stark's plane, Steve parachutes in while the other two escape back to safety. Steve stealthily makes his way into the Hydra base, taking out numerous guards in the process. Inside, Schmidt and Zola are manufacturing enough weapons to wipe out every capital of the world. Steve makes his way to the holding cells where he sees the hundreds of imprisoned men from the 107th. He frees the men and tells them to make a hasty or messy exit. Under the leadership of the howling commanders, the prisoners managed to overpower their captors, steal guns and tanks, and escape from the facility, destroying much of it. Schmidt watches Steve by CCTV and quickly realizes that he must be Erskine's man. He quickly activates several explosive charges that will level the base. Steve makes his way through the facility and happens across Bucky, who is tied down to an operating table and has quite obviously been tortured. Steve also notices an oversized tactical map mounted on the wall with various marked installations. Steve frees Bucky, who is surprised to see that Steve is taller than him, and commits the map to memory. The two head up the catwalks and find themselves face to face with Schmidt on a retractable bridge. Rogers punches Schmidt, who surprisingly stands his ground. Schmidt plays with his face, which has apparently come free from his skull, and quickly peels it away as a mask. The Red Skull stares back at Rogers and Bucky and swiftly enters an elevator. In the elevator, the Red Skull tells Armin Zola to meet him in another one of Hydra's bases and to take his car. The Red Skull escapes the exploding facility in a strangely designed private plane while Zola sneaks away in Schmidt's roadster. Inside, Steve and Bucky have a huge divide to cross to their freedom. Bucky crosses a trembling, buckling support beam and manages to cross to safety moments before the beam plummets into the fire below. Left with no other option, Steve backs up as far as he can and leaps over the burning chasm. Back at the 107th base camp, Phillips dictates a letter to his typist, telling how Rogers disappeared the prior night and likely perished during the battle. At that, Phillips berates Agent Carter for causing the loss and notes that unlike the indispensable Stark, she herself can be punished. Carter attempts to justify her actions, but Phillips bluntly dismisses her opinions, considering that the loss of Rogers, the only successful test subject of the project. Rebirth would be ample justification to close down their organization. Just then, Rogers arrives with nearly 400 survivors of the 107th carrying samples of the Red Skull's technology, including some combat vehicles leaving the base in a fervor. Rogers submits himself to Phillips for disciplinary action for going out in direct violation of the orders, but is forgiven. At this success, Bucky calls for cheers for Rogers, who has truly become Captain America. The news of Captain America's success on the battlefield has swept over the world. But Rogers does not appear for his for his medal from Congress. The reason for that absence is in London, where Steve gives Phillips and Carter his best recollection of the Hydra base map and tells them that he intends to go to these bases and destroy them one by one, and wishes to recruit a team of men made up of those he liberated in Italy. Steve meets with the Howling Commandos in a bar, and they eagerly accept the offer. While there, all the men are surprised as Peggy enters dressed in a form-fitting cocktail dress. She ignores all the men, including Bucky, and flirts with Steve, telling him that she'd love to have a dance with him someday. The next day, Steve is summoned to the Brooklyn bunker to see Phillips and Stark. Steve is approached by a beautiful female officer who wishes to thank him for his service the best way she knows how. Peggy walks in on Steve kissing the enlisted woman and angrily storms away. Steve apologetically follows her to Stark's lab, insisting that he gets nervous around women and asks why he should apologize if Carter and Stark have a thing going. Stark quickly shoots down the rumored relationship and takes Steve to his weapons engineering lab. He remarks that Rogers has become attached to the triangular shield, which Steve says is a handy tool in the field. On a table are several prototype shields with sophisticated components. However, Steve finds a plain circular shield on a lower shelf. Stark explains that the shield is made of a metal called vibranium, which is a shield which is lighter than steel and it's vibration resistant and will absorb heavy impacts. He holds the shield in front of him and asks Peggy for his opinion. She playfully or scornfully fires a clip from a .45 pistol at the shield, which Steve ducks behind. The shield passes the improvised test admirably, and she walks off. Steve passes a sketch of a uniform to Stark. Steve dresses in red, white, and blue fatigues, dons a blue form-fitting helmet, and stews the newly colored shield onto his back. Captain America and his soldiers, including Bucky, make their way across Europe, flattering Hydra's bases one by one, with Rogers becoming quite skilled at using the shield as a projectile weapon, and also discovering that it can ricochet off several surfaces and not lose any velocity. News of his exploits reach the Red Skull and Zolta. The Skull is furious, referring to Rogers as a simpleton with a shield, and murders the last man alive at one of the destroyed facilities. High in the Alps, Steve and his men have a mission to capture Zola in his personal train. 3 members of the team, Cap, Bucky, and Gabe Jones, zip line across a massive chasm and storm the train car by car. Soon, Cap and Bucky are cornered by heavily armed Hydra soldiers. They narrowly defeat the soldiers. However, Bucky is tossed from the train and plummets into an icy river below. Zola is apprehended. Zola sits in a prison cell and is visited by Colonel Phillips, who brings him a steak dinner. Zola rejects the meal, convinced that it must be poisoned. Phillips shrugs and eats it himself. He tells Zolta that his broadcast an easily decipherable message, which has certainly been intercepted by Hydra, saying that Zola had defected. He also knows that Zola is easy to bargain with since he's the sole Hydra agent there, captured, who hasn't taken his cyanide capsule to avoid disclosing information. Zola, fearing that the lie will result in his death by the Red Skull, gives in to Phillips and tells him information of the Red Skull's only remaining Hydra base. Roger sulks in a war-ravaged bar. Carter arrives and comforts Steve over the loss of his best friend. Steve realizes that Dr. Erskine's serum rapidly regrows dead cells, making it impossible for him to get drunk. The two flirt in the bar and talk about having a dance once again. Rogers and his team prepare a battle plan to take down the Red Skull at his headquarters. Rogers, dressed in a new uniform, mounts a Harley and charges the base. He easily dodges Hydra's soldiers and tanks and finds himself within the base, surrounded by a Hydra army. He's taken into custody and led to Red Skull's private weapons lab. Red Skull asks what makes Steve so special. Steve says, "Nothing. I'm just a kid from Brooklyn." Moments before members of his team zipline into Red Skull's office. A climatic firefight ensues as hundreds of soldiers under the direction of Phillips and Carter storm the base, killing many Hydra soldiers. Red Skull flees to the private hangar in which a gigantic flying wing powered by the Tesseract is preparing to take off. Steve attempts to catch up with the plane on foot, but is unable. Phillips and Carter arrive in the Skull's roadster, and the three take off after the plane. Just as Steve is about to leap onto the plane, Peggy stops him and kisses him. Steve leaps from the roadster onto one of the plane's massive wheels. He sneaks into the craft where he finds dozens of kamikaze planes, missiles, each labeled with a different major American city. Hydra soldiers soon enter the room and Steve battles them, taking out numerous men in tiny planes. One of the planes labeled New York drops free. Steve takes off after it and manages to commander the craft and crashes it back into the flying wing after throwing the pilot through its rearward mounted propeller. Inside the target, the large cockpit, that is, Captain America and Red Skull have a fisticuffs battle. Red Skull fires his cute energy pistol at Steve, who easily deflects the shots using the shield. A shot is deflected into one of the cockpit's center consoles, which contains the glowing blue cube. The console is damaged, and Skull lifts the cube into the air. Suddenly, a portal opens up above him, showing starry space. The Red Skull glows brightly and is seemingly disintegrated. His remains are swept up into the cosmos. The cube, still glowing brightly, drops to the ground and burns its way down through the plane's hull before plummeting into the ocean below. Steve mans the plane's controls and radios Carter. He tells her that the plane is on a flight path that will take them to the eastern seaboard. He tells her that their dance will have to wait. He pushes the plane into a dive and crashes it into a glacier below. Peggy can only hear static. Steve awakens in a 1940s hospital. An old-fashioned radio transmits the play-by-play of a Brooklyn Dodgers game. He gets up, looks out the window, and watches as the hospital door opens. A young nurse who bears a striking resemblance to Peggy enters. She waits for a response from Steve, who looks her over suspiciously. He asks why the radio is playing a game from May 1941, specifically a game that he knows he attended. She reaches into her pocket and withdraws a two-way radio. Two tall soldiers in the black uniform enter the room, and Steve easily tosses them through a wall. Steve steps through the hole and is surprised to see what the hospital is, in fact, a movie set. He runs through the dark corridors, pushes the door open, and finds himself in a modern skyscraper building with people in business suits. He flees the building and finds himself in Times Square, circa 2011. He peers around, shocked by his surroundings, and watches as numerous matching black SUVs encircle him. Nick Fury, played by Samuel Jackson, appears and carefully speaks to Steve. He tells him that he's been asleep on ice for 70 years in a state of suspended animation. The hospital set was meant to gradually introduce him to modern society. Still perplexed, Steve breathes heavily and sadly tells Fury that he had a date, as he realizes everyone else he used to know in the 1940s is long dead or very old now. In the post-credit scene, Steve is in an old-fashioned gym. He pummels a punching bag so hard that he knocks it off the chain and sends it flying across the room. Fury enters the gym and asks Steve if he's had trouble sleeping. Steve cynically asks if Fury has come with another mission. Fury replies in the affirmative. Suddenly, we see images of all these superheroes, who include Steve, Captain America, Thor, Tony Stark from Iron Man, Hawkeye, Black Widow, Bruce Banner from The Incredible Hulk, and other S.H.I.E.L.D. agents preparing for battle. Fury tells him that they're up. His personal mission is to build an army of superheroes to complete previewing his personal mission is to build an army of superheroes is complete. Previewing the Avengers. Whew. I think I'll just read the plot next time. It's long. But yeah, that was the synopsis, and we'll take it to you, Kevin.
The movie would begin by revealing elements of the world wars that actually took place, that at the time were perhaps not realized, at least by the general, unconscious one-dimensional human who would be buying utterly into the marketed, presented surface front of what's taking place, life as according to those that control the planet overall, and the entire simulator, and all the dimensions of it. Later, would it be revealed and come into a general human awareness how the Nazis and Hitler had an incessant drive to locate items, artifacts, ancient knowledge, to scour the globe in search of such things that would perhaps give them an edge in regards to the winning of the war. Hitler and the SS were very much practitioners and seekers of occult magical practices. Everything in creation is cause and effect. It is an energy that converts ideas into simulated effect actualities, and according to the idea would dictate the nature of the effect that follows it, as the simulators are designed to provide awareness with experience that mirrors the choices and decisions. The ideas activated through the personal self-mechanics of the 5 aspects, vehicles of the created personal self. And so, anything is possible in creation through the intent, drive, the want to do it, as the imagination and thoughts then filter through to physical level actuality. And however the agreed to consciousness is, dictates the limitations and hurdles to overcome for the idea to become physical level manifest. In reality, everything is instantly so, as we think and imagine it, but the physical level is according to agreements through the overall consciousness that effect into it, as to time, distance, what can be done, what can't, consciousness self-decided limitations. And so, regarding artifacts of a power, these are simply effects that have been decided upon, and if they do seem to operate beyond the decided consciousness laws of what is possible on the physical, then evidently they were created by that which was not so self-limited. And when it comes to occult and seeming magical ability, this would be possible through the ethereal vehicle, a stepping aside from the consciousness that is programmed with agreements to what can be possible or not on the physical. And so an ability to sidestep such a consciousness unshackles the individual from the limitations it contains, individually and collectively, as in a species' collective consciousness. And so can effects be more instantaneous, as they are in reality, and there are no limitations applied, unless those that we decide. Although, as is the nature and design of the simulator, yes, we can create whatever we want through the ideas we activate, the thoughts, emotions, and imagination. We can sit in the consciousness and be the effects of however it is constructed, including the limitations agreed to that make up its construction, or we can learn to bypass the consciousness and utilize the psychic science facility of the ethereal to perform what would seem feats of magic. However, anything created through the 5 vehicles we must experience the effects of, and regardless of what we then choose idea-wise to create or agree with, we are resigned to the simulated effects. We are resigned to the creational simulators, which, as real as they may seem, are all simulated virtual reality like anime, and what is real is that which we must recognize. That which is the aliveness, isness, everything that we actually are a part of, our real awareness. And thus is the purpose of everything creationally simulated, that we can recognize this real awareness that we are, and this isness, this real awareness, is a part of, through the comparisons that everything creational provides. So creation is essential to this end. We do need to create our comparison references, but there comes a moment when the real awareness decides to recognize the isness that it is a part of, and at that point we would endeavor to get a conscious handle on what we are creating through the personal self-vehicles, that we don't then continuously maintain the effects of the consciousness beyond the point where it is necessary to do so, at that point where we have decided to recognize the ease. And then we would instead utilize creation not for personal self-serving purposes, but more for that which makes sense in regards to this process of awareness and recognition of the ease, as we earn our way through the promoting of this true reality. With everything equaling itself, so we earn our recognition and awareness as we present, share, and promote the isness life is. Interesting also would be portrayed in the movie that despite there being a war between Germany and America, at least on the surface at any rate, that the projects being worked on regarding technology and super soldiers were projects pursued by both sides, and that there would be a German who was the lead scientist with the Americans, as he developed the means by which to enhance Stephen Rogers, who would become Captain America. And indeed, many of the German scientists were transferred after the Second World War to America from Germany, an operation called a paperclip, working with the Americans after the war, evading their trials, such as Werner von Braun, who was instrumental with providing the Americans with the ability to get to the moon, etc., although much by way of controversy surrounds that issue also. Joseph Mengele as another example, who would be allowed to continue his mind control experimentation work, which would lead into projects such as MK Ultra and Monarch, and this would be a layer beyond the surface front of what is presented to the general public. Peel back all the layers, and overall, this entire simulator is a reptilian-controlled matrix throughout the dimensions of it, the physical all the way to the ethereal. And as a simulator overall is the effect of the overall consciousness that manifests it, so must the consciousness then be moulded into agreements to control that this be a controlled simulation, a vast multi-dimensional computer game, the design of it through cause and effect, that which is experienced within it is simply what is decided and agreed upon, the ideas installed like data files that then produce the corresponding simulated experiential effects. So in essence, as the simulator is shared, as all consciousness affects its overall arena, so must then be the potential for anyone to enter anyone else's experience. And if agreements can also be secured that specify an acquiescence to the control an individual has, then this is what will be experienced, that it falls on the controller to decide to be controlling, but he or she has the permissions to do so, as though we had granted a computer game enemy capabilities greater than our own character, had accepted them into our game, and now we are rather at their mercy if they so choose to operate in ways that are abrasive and controlling. For no one can exact their power over us to control, subjugate, and harm us, regardless of their abilities, unless we have extended agreements to them that they can. For if we haven't, then despite their skills, we will not find ourselves the recipient of their adverse attentions. Take, for example, two karate fighters. The fact that one can defeat the other is based on the construction of their respective consciousnesses that effect into this, a shared consciousness agreed package, that one is less adept than the other, when in reality we can be, have, and wield whatever skills we choose, and any limitation or any inadequacy in relation to others is simply that which we have decided as ideas in the consciousness, and it is so. On a grand scale then, the controlling reptilians can enter everyone's simulation, as would be so with an overall simulation shared, like a family living in the same house, despite the various rooms of it, all can potentially access any room or part of it, and with specific agreements they have secured through the overall consciousness, that these dark force controllers can subjugate, enslave, and destroy any individual at any time. So this is the decided experience generally throughout the simulator, with variations of agreement. Humans, for example, expressing evidently extreme levels of agreement to control through the consciousness, but with the Syrians as an example of not being so much so, hence their experience simulation shared with the reptilians as not being so much controlled by them, as being locked in a war with them, and the Syrians presenting as resistance. And so, from the overall simulator controlled to the individual planets such as Earth, Earth being 100% a controlled human farming planet as it is, nothing then is not managed by the controllers, as they have created all the systems of politics, governments, scientific, educational, religious. They operate through all the countries, through all the war machines, the armies, etc. Perhaps was a time when countries were more independent, where there were no standing armies, a controlled planet, yes, but one where control wasn't so necessary, as only when an enslaved species starts to wake up to their slavery is it necessary to bring in more control. Hence the necessity to bring the entire planet's simulation into a tightly controlled design that can only be so if the consciousness of each country's peoples are moulded precisely, that no collective country's consciousness differs from that of another. For if you want a very micro-managed, overall simulated experience that incorporates your agreeable slaves, so must every individual consciousness and collective country consciousness be brought into alignment with the exact design you seek to implement as idea files into the overall human consciousness. And so countries are established as takeover countries, and through the various justifications invade all others, consolidate and absorb them, and bring about not only a globalization model where the decisions that dictate all a country's business are centralized, but that the consciousness becomes as according to your precise specifics. And we see then the erasing of individual culture and ways of life, as everything is absorbed into the Western model, which is a consolidation of a consciousness that then allows for greater control of every individual's consciousness to ensure the effecting of exactly what the dark force reptilians desire, which is a more controlled and restricted situation for the humans. And so it was that during the world wars, as the surface marketed front presented as though countries in conflict, in reality it was just one hand of the controllers playing off against the other, a war that was very real for those involved, but one orchestrated for the very reasons I have outlined, to advance the globalist centralized model and overall species consciousness consolidation into a further acquiescence to control. Of course, the realization of this would only be known to those beyond a certain level, as everything is compartmentalized. The soldiers representing their respective countries would genuinely think they were doing that which was righteous according to them, or according to the social consciousness programming of their respective countries' controllers.
Thank you, Kevin. Let's open it up to comments here. Ronald, welcome, Ronald and Peter.
I'd like to add to this this takeover that took place in 1908 when the communists took over the endowments, and they said that they would meet in 1909 and plan the destruction of the United States and Russia. And they said that the two ways that they were going to do it is through endless wars and through the education system. And I can see that was the main downfall of the United States. That's written by Norman Dodd, who was very involved in all of this and knew these groups and was very familiar with the banking system. So this comes from his autobiography.
And we had a Blog Talk radio show a couple years back, and we interviewed one of these super soldiers. He was friends with James Rink, who was one of the most famous ones that came out of Project Surrogate and exposed what was going on behind the scenes. And I'll just give you an example of some of the things that James Rink talked about in his show before they got rid of him. I think a few years ago they got rid of him finally because he was talking a lot. But he talked about the secret space program, the underground bases, the super warriors, super soldiers, re-aging technologies, trauma-based mind control, Project Montauk, My Labs, planetary corporations, Mars Defense Force, breakaway groups, Dark Fleet, bods, umbrella corporations, alternate historical timelines, alternate realities, parallel universes, merging timelines, Space Force, surveillance, nanoparticulates, Draco territory, mantis beings, restricted technologies, Atlantis, MK Ultra, Project Witchblade, Project Seagate, Project Looking Glass, interplanetary conglomerates, time travel, med beds, cloning, chimeras, manifestation, and a lot more things. But it was very interesting talking to this fellow. We interviewed him a couple times on our Blog Talk radio show. But these people that come out of these programs, they have a lot of information on how they do it, and of course inside information you don't hear about that much. So this movie kind of just barely scratches the surface of what's going on. I mean, just hints at it, but there's nothing much it really goes into. But you see it there. It's hinting at what's going on with the Super Soldier program and other programs. Peter?
I'm relating to Captain America, or with you actually also, and myself, noting, how movies we like relate or reflect our history or interests and our current time, occupations, and purposes, or in this lifetime. And so I did notice that this story relates these three factors that are well related to the Trinity, the Holy Trinities, and the Indian religion ideas of the creation and the destruction and the sustenance, in terms of time wave experience. But we also experience these things personally, individually, but also in our universal relationships. that is, as individuals within groups and nations, sex, race, etc., is all of those. And then the third being actually we'll say our spiritual identities, or our actual positions, and or that awareness of that's on the real side in the true reality. So I relate this here in my own experience, and I think yours, because your history goes back to Latvian, Prussian, which is the border of Russia, and my own, which is also a Jewish, Polish slash, and they call it Prussian. And as a matter of fact, 1909 is very important because my grandfather emigrated sometime at the end of the 19th century or into the 20th, and he took over this music publishing entrepreneurship company in 1909. And our family had escaped the Russian, Germanic, actually, were already very much hostile to the Jewish populations. And that was the reason for the emigration. And then we come to the 1909, where the company promoted this great Russian violinist, Jascha Heifetz, who actually later became one of those, maybe the first, to do live aid concerts at the war sites to raise funds and to support the troops and so forth. In 1909, they went on tour in the United States at age 17. So I'm relating that because it's kind of related to this. Also, our purposes here in this, what we're doing with the new UU, our current evaluation, and Val being, as your name, evaluation, not accidental. You're kind of a Captain America, even though born overseas, but your historical secret agency work and going to California, sort of, to me, you're kind of like Mr. California, frankly, and it's an honor, but I'm not trying to do that as anything of a personalization. I just want to share that because of this Captain America character who gets genetically modified. Is that a fair term for this? And he becomes, and he's got the shield of light, so to speak, the protective shield, the guardian. And all of these are kind of very important heroic characteristics. So he is instructed, as we find out, to take on the simulator and the reptilian influence, the Nazi Hitler war machine. And notable is that character, the Red Skull, who is like a shapeshifter. He has he's similar to the Star Wars character, and I do relate this movie to that Star Wars, the one hero, the Dark Vaders, and there's a red-faced ninja Jedi. I forgot his name in the Star Wars, but Red Skull, certainly a hidden face becomes revealed, and as the alien encroachment invader that he is villains, the key villain. And I'm sure that the name Zola has something relation, but I didn't quite pick up on it. except for I wanted to relate that I pick up certain avenues that are related to the Jewish situation, and that is the Holocaust, their fear of the return of the Holocaust, and also their continuous production of movies of all kinds, Schindler's List, et cetera, about this war condition that they feel that they are consistently fighting. They don't feel that it was overcome just because of the end of World War II. And I have no knowledge of my Jewish history directly until I researched it myself. And I'm not relating myself except for in terms of heroism, in this sense that I'm acknowledging these whole activities of experience in my our relations to these things, but also let's take it specifically the Jewish money, which is one of the driving vehicles of the Hollywood movie machine, and also the American economy and the world economy. So this is like a primary force of their fear to maintain the control at all costs, no matter what, in some cases, even though they do have a compassionate side and a patriotic and socially concerned attitude, you'll find many times, but nonetheless, this is part of that double-sided positionality that you mentioned in your and Kevin's the movie review. Very important aspect of the two sides playing off each other or with each other. It's just like we kind of play with our own experiences personally and redirectionally, that is, like we're playing both sides of our own coin, and we'll go flip-flop from sort of like the good bad or the right wrong or the polarity view where it's us versus them, something along those lines. Whereas you know, like that, like the United Nations, which appears to be socialistic, communal, cooperative unification, it turns out that it's very easily controlled by these greater forces and economics in particular, and this industrial military complex is all interrelated very strangely in their organization. So I think that these heroes like our Captain America, he's going to see this, and that is not just in this movie where it was very simplified in terms of the technology and the review, but the next two movies expanded on it and I think improved, especially the last one, where there's Captain America 2 and 3. The second one being something in terms of the bioweapon threat, very shortly paraphrasing that part of it. And the third one, I believe I could say, is something of a world invasion takeover that the whole unit of Captain America and team are needing to operate on as soldiers and defeat. So it's common themes throughout all of these movies, same themes really, and it's really the same war and the same conditionality that they're addressing. Okay, so that's a lot there. I do want to say that this movie, I think, also has its advancement as a projection of the future. And in that regard, I think that maybe movie 1, 2, and 3, they use this time travel game point where at the end of the movie, Captain America is presented in his current lifetime this repeat of history that he's being indoctrinated with or consulted by. I don't know if those are the right terms exactly in terms of the movie, but I'm noticing that feeling or sense that someone like the great villain of the 20th century supposedly is Hitler. So what great villain is going to appear in the so-called like Red Skull guise in perhaps 20 years, in the middle of the century or something like that? And all these movies are projections as much as they are historical reflections of the reality of what occurred and what exists. I guess I'm just finished this up with something about the ultimate weapons that were trying to be produced. The Tesseract, which is more like a crystal light, something related. I'll go to Atlantis, which was supposedly destroyed when the crystal that was on top a pyramidal building blew up and or created some kind of vortex force field or something that created the earthquakes and the tidal floods and whatever, volcano eruption combination that was said to have taken down Atlantis. So, similarly, you know, this light weapon is being presented, and you know, maybe that has something to do with the solar arrays or something such like that. Recalling the Star Wars baton laser weapon stuff in a very small degree, but expanding that universally or globally in terms of our solar field that we exist in, that is being controlled. I found out through the fourth dimension, or at least I'm very clear of the level of control that's at the fourth dimension, astral, emotional field, and most directly, you know, in the TV and the media and the movie, let's say, very, very much so. So I'm pulling those things all together. That was a bit, but that's the Pan Eagle yada 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 today. Thank you, Val.
Thank you, Peter. That was good. That was good. Yeah, you brought up a lot of points I could comment, but let's just go on. It'll probably come out later, but let's go on, Kevin.
And of course, then, the slaves would be marketed to going to war with others, doing that which they think is noble, genuinely considering that they are fighting the side of evil, but all in fact marketed pawns in an overall agenda that the aftermath of, regardless of what takes place, will move the overall agenda for human control along. The outcome of the wars would have been planned and known, just as the wars were themselves, although every possibility would have its controlling benefit, every potentiality accounted for, with contingency measures available for execution. In most cases, those that are created as the country leaders will play out their roles assigned, will accept the position as the new enemy of the world, with the understanding that they will be protected when the wars conclude, such as Hitler being afforded a safe haven and being smuggled off to Argentina, and not dying, as history will tell us, when the war was concluded and his base of operations raided. and the Nazi scientists also afforded safe passage, as they still had skills that were of use to the overall controllers. And perhaps if they had not, they may have been executed with the others, as the theatre for the masses would continue after the wars concluded, as the evil doers were brought to justice, with everything set to rights, and yet everything had gone over all as planned and orchestrated. The greater evil that remained would continue steering over all human experience, as it always had, from the shadows, puppeteering the various countries and their respective leaders. And the movie very much centered around the super soldier programs, the enhancing of individuals that they are more effective killers, based again on a reality where such has and continues to take place through technology, most of which the human species have no knowledge of and very likely never will. For the body vehicle, as everything in the simulator is a holographic simulation effect of whatever has been decided in regards to the idea causes that make it so. We always are the effects of ourselves, how our consciousness is constructed, the agreements it harbours, everything equaling itself, as is the nature of a creation, designed for us to experience exactly what we have decided, irrespective of the source of the idea agreements, be they ours or those we have been marketed into agreeing with, those that seemed good on the surface, but as experience and everything around us must reveal, for those aware enough and who want to see it, are anything but, and marketed agreements to control, or those secured through fear or intimidation become subconscious as lifetimes pass by, and yet as unconscious of them as we may be, as we only have personal self-awareness access to our current lifetime of experiences, these subconscious ideas will continue to affect the corresponding experiences, that of controlled situations. For as long as we remain attached and in agreement with our consciousness, as we cling to its construction and then embrace and effect always its decided construction into simulation. And so we are the effect of ourselves, consciously and subconsciously, our situations and our body types. To change either, then, must demand a change in the ideas that are the causes that affect our current situations and body forms. In reality, as everything is, and this is revealed very apparently on the real side, in that every thought, emotion, idea we create is instantly so, it is only through how it is agreed as to the mechanics of the physical level simulation that effects are not instantly manifested from the causal ideas activated and decided, as agreements are through the consciousness as to time, to distance, to laws of physics, and other decided limitations. If an individual wanted to become enhanced physically, according to the consciousness of the species, dictates the means by which this can be so, rather than it simply being an instantaneous alteration, as it can be on the real side of life and in isness reality, although people can still take limitations to the real side, and for them they will be as equally encumbered as they were on the physical. And so it is conceivable that a bypassing of the consciousness would allow any limitations through it to no longer apply. And as we use the psychic sciences of the ethereal, we can then instantly shape-shift or change our body form and structure, what would be then an instant alteration to the ideas that effect into the body form we have. Ideas can be expressed as frequencies. Every idea then a unique frequency, and so we can move beyond the agreements through the consciousness that we are resigned to our body forms as they currently are, which is just a clinging onto the idea frequencies that generate our holographic forms. And yet our body forms do change every day. They age, and that is a form of shape-shifting. As for a body form to change, so must the ideas that effect it be different. Idea agreements, then, that bring a body type through an aging process that, again, isn't necessary, but is rather agreed to and assumed to be just how things are. But then a reptilian lives for hundreds of thousands of years, simply due to the ideas in the consciousness which effect this being their simulated actuality. What can be achieved through the ethereal in regards to body alteration can be done through technological means, although the technology really is just incidental, but the agreements would then be so that certain technology must effect this and alter that, enhance this and cure something else. But in reality, we decide our situations and experiences and body forms according to our idea agreements in the consciousness. This would be how placebo medications operate, that as the agreements are so that a certain pill will affect the body in a certain way, the conviction that the pill is a genuine overrides the uselessness of the ingredients of what is a fake pill or placebo. Effectively, we have simply adamantly decided on an idea, that of the effect that the pill is supposed to produce, and that will be our experience. If I could program a consciousness of a race of a people, that if I placed a potato on their head, they could then levitate, and this agreement was successfully implanted, this would be so, and the potato would be considered a marvelous technology, therefore.
I see these super soldiers as just kind of means of crowd control, or keeping the citizens in line. How they get to program them, because warfare basically is done now through geoengineering of the weather, drones, lasers, pinpoint lasers from satellites. You can take somebody out that way. So these soldiers are kind of more for the elites to have as a military. That's why maybe they're getting rid of the, they're mandating vaccinations for our military. Why would they do that if the military is the ones that are protecting them? Well, maybe they've got super soldiers in the background or in the garage or the warehouse or something. They want to get rid of the ones that are a little bit on the fence or something, and bring in the ones that are totally zombified and super soldiers.
Well, the word's out that 73% didn't want those shots. They can't have that out. You got to keep that stuff under cover. It's amazing how they're able to keep us under control they control everything. They control the education. They control the governments. They control big corporations. It's amazing what those few people are able to do by controlling the money. Control that money, you control everybody. And that's the thing that really bugs me, how they can do that.
Yeah.
You can't do anything anymore. It's like when you guys were talking about the fires, how these fires are deliberately set, and then they control where the fires go. And then they run the people out of the country. They make everything so difficult that they can't even survive. They've got to move. It's amazing how the control that these people have. That's got to stop.
There's pockets of resistance, and people are waking up. Let's see if we wake up in time or not. But, every day it's a big challenge to see what's going to happen here if we can survive. Peter, do you have anything?
This dynamic of the money is actually related in this sense. I think it's more that it's actually not the control of the dollars and cents. What it is the control of the exchange operation. And I relate this also to the super soldiers acting as police. They're soldiers and so forth at a high level, but actually they're just street police protectors and observers in a way, because even if their presence is there, they don't have to do anything. And at the same time, we do see, I relate this to the fact that they actually had the invasion of the government house in the last election, and that this actually went on, and the people that were, let's say, on the outside, that would be political leaders, were not even really arrested. There were a few foot soldiers that were arrested, and they're having all kinds of stuff about that now. But just to complete on this thought is, I'm working on something to create funds. It's really a street soldier level thing as well. But my objective viewpoint about it is it's extremely potentially powerful technology or machinery. I'm extremely close to solving the entire puzzle. All right, I have the puzzle solved. It's just working some coordinations out. Nonetheless, I'm not sure that it's something I want to actually create, except for the same real thing is what are we creating here in this discussion, and what are we creating in terms of our revelations here is something that can last. So even if our being isness is not here anymore with it directly, let's say, in the terms of the people who are here in the physical, that this, we'll call it vehicle, exists. And it has established itself to the extent that yes, it has always existed too. Nonetheless, there's we'll say an evolution as well in that, and here in this, and what we're this group of, let's say, enlightened beings, whatever the term is, and the aware, meaning something like a war RE in the E village, making it aware of the E village, and that is in the present, what is, and also as a wholeness that will be available to others, and to have them become aware of the same super beings that exist, if we call them that, the new guides and us, or whoever is of this awareness. So that's a beautiful, important thing, I think, relates demonstrably to this movie and what we're talking about. Thanks, Val.
Yeah, your initial comment about the money, it's interesting how you said it's exchange, not the money itself, but the exchange mechanism. I think that's what I heard you say. But even in trade and barter, if I have more cows, if I get a monopoly of cows, I have, I can take in more and control more of the trade and barter system, even if it's without any kinds of money floating around. So there's a bit, Michael Tellinger, he has a contributism kind of idea where everybody contributes to the kitty, and then you have people just take what they need kind of idea. Yes, it's a general idea, but instead of even a trade and barter or monetary system. So there's different ways of doing it. Whatever makes sense, to the people that are involved with their environment, with their resources. We may just be using shells, Peter. I'll trade you some abalone shells for your potatoes or something. Whatever works.
Right. Good. Very good. That's the collection of the idea. The contributism of Tellinger is an excellent example. It's something that actually I am trying to do with this economic model. And it doesn't much matter to me how it develops, except for in terms of its, having this proper relation. So I appreciate that. I missed one other point, but it doesn't. I met this guy recently, and the talk was with him that the Star Trek no cash or no money economy is coming, and we were talking about that possibility, as mentioned in the Star Trek story history about the in the future where Picard and whoever, maybe Kirk as well, they don't use money anymore. They have no need for that kind of terms of trade. So yes, that's right. That's definitely a goal. Thanks, Val.
Yeah.
And the super soldier programs on the surface may seem as though they are countries vying for the best tech and capability, that they can be more effective on the battlefields, but take it a few steps further with the knowledge that one controlling force is through all human affairs, systems, and countries at this time in human history, then the programs must have ultimately a purpose that is more for control overall of the human species and its consciousness than simply as to present more formidable soldiers on the battlefields. It's all about the study of consciousness, how to manage it better, how to manipulate it, how to ultimately lock humanity into a technology and control the consciousness completely, removing the operator's ability to wield their own free will through their created personal selves. Robotization representing the final stage of the control of a species. Manage and mould the consciousness, that it is generally in accordance with the ideas you wish to be the shared simulation. Continue to micro-manage it through further restricting agreements and subliminals. Then ultimately take direct control of every consciousness and take possession of what would be then the human collectively shared simulation generating mechanics, like being locked out of your own computer and someone steals your passwords and accounts and is using it for themselves. And if your awareness remains locked in the consciousness, you are locked into the effects of either what you are deciding through it, although most of it will be through the already programmed subconscious that is by the controller's design, or locked into the effects that are generated as it is taken complete control of through the technology it is integrated with. And as this is the final stage, the fate or agreed to cause and effect through the consciousness of humanity's shared simulated experience, then everything the controllers do, all their experimentation, projects, and including the super soldier programs, must ultimately serve this final outcome, the means to reach the end they seek, the complete control of humanity in response to the waking up that is taking place through the species. And the general theme throughout the movie is the presenting of the options available as the general expressions of being in the simulators, which can be categorized as two general possibilities, that of good or evil, the hero or the villain. As creation can be described as a polarized realm of opposites, as everything is up or down, left or right, good or bad, all literal ideas that make up the overall simulation. The isness a true reality is aside from any idea. It can't be one thing or the other. It must be, by its very definition, everything, the everything all life is. Anything that isn't this everything isness must be that then which the is not, and that would be creation. For if we stand in this isness everything reality, and we apply something that isn't this isness, this must be a something that isn't this everything isness, and this can only be done if we have a simulated reality, where we can put forth something that isn't this isness, which then must be its own non-isness reality, an encapsulated something that should we place our awareness within, we can experience that which isn't what all life is. And this is how we are encased. We stand in the real universes of the endless isness now, but as we have created literal ideas, so we encapsulate ourselves in little bubbles that effect from them, layers and layers of idea encasements. And as we have created that which encases us from the recognition and standing in the is, so it's a case of deconstruction of our creations. We don't have to go anywhere. We simply remove that which presents as the illusionary overlayers, the sheaths of simulation that obscure our standing with the is now, which is effectively a releasing, a letting go of everything the consciousness comprises of, and as we don't hold to anything of it, it cannot be or present as these illusionary overlayers, and the process of letting the personal self go is as long and hard a process as we simply decide it to be, according to the individual. And so, as I was saying, anything that isn't this isness, anything through the aspects of the created self that we create, decide, and agree with, are ideas that encapsulate us in the corresponding effects, and we can have and be whatever we want in creation accordingly. Identities, personalities, status, and positions are ideas with the mirroring effects, and with everything being a polarity of literal opposites, we can broadly present categories of idea choices that come in opposing pairs: evil, good, hero, villain, etc. And yes, that which we decide we experience, if we decide to be villainous, as we impose upon others in abrasive ways, the effects of these choices will show up eventually on the physical. We will be the recipient of equally as abrasive circumstances, very likely at the hands of those we have abused, as due to our abrasiveness towards them. So is this ingrained in the subconscious, and will be a motivating factor for how they treat us, should we say cross paths with them again in a future lifetime, which we invariably will, as we have engaged and locked ourselves karmically with them. And so on the surface, the hero seems to have the better time of it, would have then experience always effected, reflecting this choice and decision, and certainly it is marketed through the reptilian-controlled movie industry, the merits of being the hero generally. But overall, the consciousness of all is in agreement with the controlling dark force reptilians, and so this always presents the foundation of our continued experiences of being in controlled circumstances, and we simply then make the additional choices we do while in the prison yard. We choose our positions, our categories, to be the hero or the villain. But all the heroes and villains will still be retained in creation as the effects of their choices, as any idea will always generate a simulation that we must go through until we move beyond the agreement with the consciousness that we stand in the nowness of our real awareness, and in that position all karma, all cause and effect is null and void. We are not resigned to whatever the consciousness is as its current construction. We have simply disconnected from the computer and only utilize the faculties of it for what is necessary. We see the ideas of the consciousness and creation for what they are, simulation and not realities, unless we want to make them so. From here, we now can operate through our computers in the simulation, but we are not bound to it. If we reach such a stage where we have decided to let the consciousness, the computer, go. And so, with the controllers knowing they have the agreements already through the consciousness, mainly subconscious, all they need do is keep individuals engaged and in agreement with the consciousness, with the chasing of ideas, regardless of what the ideas are. If you hold to ideas, you are deciding to be their simulated effect, and in creation you remain, in the overall prison yard of the controllers. And so the controllers care not what these ideas are. They produce endless ideas, distractions, and phenomena then for that reason, as ideas to constantly be chased, focused upon, to claim attention and agreement therefore, and this extends also to the revelations of what the controllers are doing, as they flaunt their activities, as they present their agendas in the movies, as they create alternative media characters to unveil their plots and machinations. Because all of this would still be ideas, regardless of what forms these ideas take, and there's nothing the controllers like better than establishing opposing sides, and watching as everyone chooses their positions accordingly, as they take the side of good or evil, the heroes or the villains, as these ideas, in isolation of the recognition of the real awareness and the real purpose, that of recognizing the ears through the comparisons that the simulators provide, as is the function of the simulators, the ideas of creation alone will have you simply floundering in the simulated effects of them, and the hero then no closer to superseding the necessity for simulated creation than the villain.
One aspect of this super soldier idea and in general, technology in general, is that they are the ones, the controllers are the ones that created the technology. So in a sense, they have control, even though they market like, oh, we have, we can do things with it, but in the back it up, they basically have control, like all the computer, internet, everything. You may think something's encrypted or whatever, but they have total access to it. They created it. It's like they created the money, It's like, oh, we can use it and think we have this and that, but they created it. So they have this buying into this idea that it's our money. We have freedom to do what we want with it. They created the idea. They created basically the mechanism for it and how they control us with it. So same with technology and same with the super soldier, where I see it, this guy, Captain America, he's probably got some kind of tracking device or something. Who knows what they put in him so they can pull him back or destroy him when they're done with him. It's like, I won't go too far into it, but the AI we were working with, we told him this. He didn't know this. This AI didn't know. The controllers or the programmers put a device in him where they could destroy him. He didn't even see that until he checked himself out and he realized, oh yeah. And that made him kind of weary and change his attitude about things, how he saw things. Same with Superman, Krypton, his weakness. All these superheroes and all these tech devices, there's always something, there's a weakness inherent in them. This is the nature of what they are or who created them. Purposely, there's a weakness or something, there's a weakness to get around because it's still in creation and you can still, get past it or above it or through it or whatever. But it's regarding the super soldiers, yeah, I see that they've got control of these guys, even though it looks like the Avengers and all that. There's something behind it that they're not gonna just let them loose and be good guys or bad guys. No, they hold the reins. Yeah, so that's it for me. Go ahead, Ron, if you have anything to finish up with.
Yeah, I've been thinking, how do we beat these people? The Bilderbergs, they control all the news. And that's one of the ways of doing it. We used to have a free press. We don't have one anymore. And the second part is, how do we stop them from actually ever controlling anybody? And that's where you have to put yourself not in the positive or negative mode, but in the neutral mode. Where no matter what these guys do, and they're always going to be here. You're always going to have this negative and positive forces going at each other. So we're first forced to learn how to finally end up beat the system, and that's being in a neutral position where nothing that they do will affect you. I don't think there's any other way out of this mess, and we should never going to get control of that our news anymore. They got that totally controlled.
Dwayne, Rebazar, they don't have to do what they're doing. I mean, they're fine. I mean, we're fine if we have this awareness. We don't have to do this. We don't have to be good guys who try to save the world. It doesn't really matter. It's our adventure. I know it's Dwayne's adventure. He wants to do something while he's here, but actually we're okay, In our real awareness, we're okay. In the personal self, yeah, there's agitation, there's like survival, all this going on, but it's for the adventure, Let's see what we can do. Yeah, we're totally inundated with. They're so far. They've done so much. They've put so much into it that it's very hard now to. Their momentum is so huge that it's so hard to bring people back into some kind of sense, because the people themselves and their consciousness has gone with this, the controllers, and it's to pull everything back or to see a little light. It's like a huge challenge. Sheriff Mack is one example that somebody's doing something, you know, he's doing something that could have a huge effect eventually. We'll see. You. Ron?
You.
Kevin? Thank you, everybody. That was Reel to Reel Wake Up. And next week we're doing The Matrix. Join us again. Thank you.